Bubba Wallace is still expected to return to 24/11 Racing in 2025, but his future is a little uncertain as 24/11 Racing has not signed the new charter agreement. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed for today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight those really quickly. We're first going to talk about the Atlanta Xfinity Series race for the spring, as they have a title sponsor for the event. The title sponsor is going to be called the Bennett 250. Bennett, which of course has association with Georgia, of course sponsored the most recent NASCAR Xfinity Series race. Not a major shock to see him sponsoring it. It's some pretty good sponsorship. Austin Hill is somehow probably going to win that race. It's really cool nonetheless to see that Bennett will be sponsoring the NASCAR Xfinity Series race in the spring at Atlanta. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Michael McDowell. Now, Michael McDowell did win the NASCAR Cup Series pole for the race at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And with him winning the pole, he has now won 4 consecutive poles on super speedways. He is the first driver to do this since Bill Elliott back in 1985 and 1986. Now, what's crazy about that stat is when Bill Elliott won 4 straight poles, that's when the restrictor plate wasn't a major thing. With the next-gen car, and really for the last 40 years, Michael McDowell has been doing this with some sort of plate on the car. So it's very impressive to see Michael McDowell be able to do this and have 4 consecutive poles. Front row has been so dominant. In fact, Michael McDowell has had 5 poles so far, all in 2024. The other one coming at Gateway, and he could have won the pole for the Daytona 500 and qualify second. So his average qualifying position on super speedways is like 1.2 or 1.3 or something like that this year. It's really impressive, and it's pretty crazy to see as Michael McDowell, unfortunately, will go to Aspire Motorsports next year. It's really unfortunate he's leaving the team, but it's a really impressive stat nonetheless. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stewart Racing. With Stewart Racing winning the 2024 Southern 500 with Chase Briscoe, they have picked up their 70th career NASCAR Cup Series win. This will likely be their final win in the NASCAR Cup Series unless they win the final 9 races of the 2024 season, as they will shut down at the end of this year. It was a major accomplishment for the team, the first time the organization had won the Southern 500 since 2020 when Kevin Harvick went to victory lane. Obviously, it's sad to see that this organization will be shutting down at the end of the year, but at least they're going to go out on a high note with a win, and maybe Chase Briscoe, even though he crashed today at Atlanta, maybe he can find a way to make it to the next round. Nonetheless, congratulations, SHR, on having 70 wins in the NASCAR Cup Series. It's really awesome and great to see overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as I'm unfortunately taking this episode to a sour note. As unfortunately was confirmed on Friday that Paul Goldsmith sadly passed away at the age of 98 years old. Paul Goldsmith, for those who don't know, was a pioneer of NASCAR. He won a lot of races on the beach, but wasn't just successful in NASCAR. He won races in motorcycles. He won races in Indycar or Champ Car back in the day. He also competed in the Indy 500 in the 1950s and I believe the early 1960s as well. He was one of the most versatile drivers and one driver that I feel like should have had a lot more respect back in the day than he really got in his career. I'm really disappointed and sad to hear this news. My prayers and condolences do go out to the Goldsmith family. Unfortunately for Paul, he was 98 years old. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Justin Mondyke. As it was announced on Friday that Justin Mondyke will make his NASCAR Truck Series debut next weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway, driving for Young's Motorsports. Justin Mondyke, for those who don't know, has been racing in the super late model scene, I believe, in the truck track championships in Wisconsin for many, many years, and has won some championships in those leagues as well. Justin is going to have a really good chance and opportunity. Sometimes these organizations like Young's Motorsports like to bring out some really cool names and really cool drivers to get a chance and opportunity to make their debut. It's really exciting stuff for him. I really hope Justin can do a really good job. I think ultimately the goal is to make the field. I think he's going to probably be driving a 20 truck if I'm not mistaken, so he's probably going to have to make it in, but I do think that Justin Mondyke has a really strong chance and a pretty good opportunity. Glad to see nonetheless he'll get the chance and opportunity to drive and make his Truck Series debut at Bristol Motor Speedway next weekend with Young's Motorsports. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jimmie Johnson. Now, over the weekend, Jimmie Johnson was, I believe, in the UK racing in the Goodwood Festival. Now, early in the race, Jimmie Johnson had unfortunately crashed. But on the final couple restarts of the race, Jimmie Johnson somehow, in some shape or form, with his teammate Dario Franchitti, was able to find his way up to the front, passed from 4th to 1st, and was able to pick up the victory at the Goodwood Festival for 2024. This is really good to see. It has been a long time since I've seen Jimmie Johnson go to victory lane. The last time I saw him win was 2017 at Dover. So to see him go out there and find something to race in and not only be successful, but go out there and win, it's really, really great to see. I'm happy for Jimmy to have this accomplishment. Congratulations to him on winning at the Goodwood Festival. It's a really big deal. And nonetheless, like I said, congratulations to Jimmie Johnson on winning at the Goodwood Festival. I'm very happy for him and glad to see he was able to have success overseas and go to victory lane at the Goodwood Festival with Dario Franchitti as a teammate. Congratulations to him on that. Really exciting stuff, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Thomas Annunziata. As it was announced on Friday late day that Thomas Annunziata will be driving a 35 for Joey Gase Motorsports this weekend at Watkins Glen in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He, of course, will be doing double duties. I believe he'll be driving the 44 car in the ARCA race than previous day on Friday. Thomas has been successful in the Trans Am Series and has been had some pretty big standouts in ARCA this year as well. He finished runner-up at Daytona and I believe had a chance to win the ARCA race in Mid-Ohio about a month or two ago. Thomas has had a lot of success on road course racing, and I do think that will carry into this week. And I think he actually could have a good chance and opportunity, maybe get a top 20 or top 25. Mason Maggio did get a top 20 or top 25 this past week in Atlanta, so he'll be looking to do that. There's going to be a very competitive field. I think this 35 car, with how good they ran Atlanta, I'd have to imagine that they're going to be in a pretty good position to make it in on owner's points. But if Thomas can make the field, I think he could have a really strong and fantastic run. There's a great opportunity for Thomas, and I do think he'll be good. I've liked Thomas's racecraft so far. I think Thomas could have a really strong and great run, and hope he can have a fantastic run with Joey Gase Motorsports this weekend at Watkins Glen. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rafael Moto. As it was reported by the ARCA starting parking guy Colby Evans that originally Rafael Moto was supposed to make his Xfinity Series debut with Peterson Racing Group. However, it was sadly confirmed last night that Rafael Moto sadly will not race at Watkins Glen this weekend in the number 87 car for the Peterson Racing Group. They had done a lot of things they were supposed to do to get to race this weekend, but unfortunately I think they weren't approved by NASCAR to get it done. Rafael Moto had competed in Indycar, I believe, in the late 2000s to the early 2010s, and has also been competing in the Trans Am Series, long drivers at times like Connor Zilisch and Thomas Annunziata as well, and I believe has also won some TA2 championships as well. It's a shame because he would have been a pretty competitive car. Yes, Peterson Racing Group doesn't have a lot of owners points going in the event because they've kind of been using the 32 car, even though the Austin Green driver who was supposed to drive the 87 car, of course, he's been driving the 32 car this year. This car will have ECR engines. Originally was supposed to have ECR engines at the point. So I'm not exactly sure if we're going to see him or that team show up this year. It's disappointing to see nonetheless because I feel like that Rafael would have had a very strong chance and opportunity to be very, very competitive. But it is what it is. Sometimes things like this are going to happen. I hope Rafael does get the chance and opportunity to race at the Charlotte Roval. And if he does get the chance, I hope he can honestly be very competitive and very fast because I think Rafael was a very talented driver and he's a pretty good road course racer. And I think if he got the chance and opportunity, he'd be pretty competitive if he did get the chance. But sadly, like I said, he will not be racing, unfortunately, this weekend at Watkins Glen. Very disappointing, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IndyCar. As it was announced on Friday late morning that IndyCar will have an alternate compound for the season finale next weekend or this weekend at Nashville Super Speedway. They're going to have the normal black tire they use for all the ovals, which has been used for every race, and they're also going to have an alternate red compound they kind of use for road courses. This, I believe, will be only the second time in recent years that they've had an alternate compound, as they actually did try this out at Gateway at Worldwide Technology Raceway last year, and it didn't produce their greatest results overall. Honestly, I'm glad they're trying to bring something in to make this season finale interesting, even though I will say the recent races on the short ovals for IndyCar have been very, very good. But at the same time, I'm also a little surprised that they're announcing that they're doing this really close to the championship finale. I feel like that if you were going to try something out like this, why not try it in Milwaukee or try it out at the previous races at Iowa? That would have made a lot more sense to me, or doing it at Worldwide Technology Raceway where you had done it last year. I don't think that you should be introducing something like this when you're really close to a championship, because it can affect the outcome of a championship. Kind of like how the hybrid system has affected the championship this year for drivers like Scott Dixon and technically, of course, Alex Palou this year. Again, I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it interesting, which I have no problem with them trying to make it interesting. But at the same token and same time, I feel like now would have not been the time to announce something like this and a change like this. I feel like they probably should have waited a little bit. That's just my honest opinion. But I feel like they jumped the gun a little bit too soon and too early. And personally, I think they should have tried this out a little bit later, basically before we got to the season finale, and not tried it out at the season finale, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ollie Bearman. As it was confirmed on Friday morning that Ollie Bearman will in fact replace Kevin Madison for this weekend's Formula One race at the Baku Grand Prix. Remember, we talked about this on the channel, I believe, last week, but it was announced because Kevin Madison had acquired too many penalty points, which I believe the limit is 11 or 12 penalty points for a whole entire season or part of a 12-month calendar. He had acquired 12 penalty points, meaning that Kevin Madison will unfortunately have to sit out one race. So they're bringing in Ollie Bearman, who, of course, will join Haas F1 in 2025. Obviously, Ollie Bearman had a very successful debut race substituting in for Carlos Sainz, where he had finished in 8th. And I actually think of how fast the Haas organization has been at points this year, I would not be surprised or shocked if we see Ollie Bearman going out there and competing to get points. We've seen the Haas team, like I said, be a little quicker. Nico Hulkenberg's had some pretty impressive runs, or some of the other drivers part of the team have had very, very good runs. And I think that Ollie Bearman could be very fun to watch next year or even for this weekend, because we can get a really good gauge in a Haas car, what he is going to be able to accomplish and what he's going to be able to do. Now, Kevin Madison will return at the next race. I can't remember exactly where they're going after Baku, unfortunately, but I do think that Ollie Bearman will be very solid, pretty competitive, and I think he'll have a very successful and pretty strong run when we do go race there. I think he will be competing for points, and it's a fantastic, great opportunity for Ollie Bearman to get a chance to race in for Kevin Madison at the Baku GP later this weekend. I hope he can have a really strong and great run at the Baku Grand Prix. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Dodge. As it was reported by Adam Stern and confirmed on Friday that Dodge will be joining Nitrocross for the 2024 and 25 season. They'll be partnering up with Dry Rainbow Racing for the 2024 and 25 season, and they're going to be using, I believe, the Dodge Dart, if I remember correctly, or another vehicle that they have in their pipeline. This is going to be the first time that Dodge has really been in any other motorsport outside of NHRA in a very, very long time. And while, yes, they're going to be, of course, competing in a Nitro series, it's really amazing to see that Dodge is coming back to motorsport in a pretty major way. There, of course, were rumors a few years ago about Dodge coming to NASCAR, all the way back, I believe, to last year or late 2022. There have been rumors that they were interested in maybe coming back to NASCAR, but obviously Dodge has been getting rid of some of their major things they've been using, and they're kind of going to the nitro and electric side of things, and that's why they're going to the nitro side of things for this event. And of course, they're going to be partnering up with the really strong organization of Dry Rainbow Racing. Dry Rainbow Racing has been successful in IndyCar for many years. Of course, they usually only run one major event, and that is the Indy 500, but they used to be a very successful team, and they're still pretty successful when, of course, they're running the Indianapolis 500. But again, like I said, I'm just glad to see that they're showing up once again. And maybe in the future, if you do get some sort of electrical components, maybe they somehow find their way back to NASCAR. I think it'd be pretty cool if they got the chance and opportunity to come back to NASCAR maybe in the future. But again, it's just great to see this for sure. And pretty excited to see that Dodge is coming back to racing once again. Outside of NHRA, of course, they're focused with Tony Stewart Racing and Tony Stewart and his team over there. I'm just glad to see that Dodge is back in the racing world, and I really hope they can be very successful and solid with Dry Rainbow Racing for the 2024 to 2025 season. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about AM Racing. Now, I cannot remember who posted this. This might have been Brian Nolan from Front Stretch, if I'm not mistaken. But he basically took a photo showing that AM Racing had put a piece of tape on the pit box where Hailie Deegan's name was. Basically because Lost Allen, of course, is driving the number 15 car for AM Racing at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And remember, we talk about this on the channel many, many times. But of course, Hailie Deegan is no longer at AM Racing going forward. They have parted ways right before the Chicago Street Course weekend. And since that time, we have seen drivers like Joey Logano get behind a wheel in a couple races, Josh Berry get behind a wheel in a couple races. I think Gus Steen drove at Daytona, and Lost Allen is driven at Michigan and Atlanta Motor Speedway. Now, Lost Allen had a very solid performance at Atlanta Motor Speedway, finishing, I believe, in 11th position, which is only the third best finish I believe they've had so far in 2024. And obviously, the team has struggled for the most part this year. And again, this is going to cause a lot of controversy. Now, I feel like with AM Racing, it was really good to see them actually have a very, very strong and a fantastic run. Considering AM Racing's been very inconsistent at times this year, they've had a lot of electrical issues. I do think Hailie Deegan was part of the problem for sure. I don't think there's any denying that, but I also do think that the team itself need to make some big changes. But having a strong run like they had this weekend is going to be a step in the right direction for that organization. I want to see them succeed. It'd be really cool for that organization to succeed. And obviously there's been rumors of drivers like Harrison Burton maybe going over there, maybe somehow Brett Moffitt heading over there in the future as well. But again, it's just great to see them have another fantastic run, or one of their few great runs they've had this year. You go back to last year, Brett Moffitt had 8 top 10 finishes, I believe, last year, and a top 5 at Chicago. So I'm just glad to see him run very well. I don't know, like I said, who'll be the driver behind him going into 2025. Maybe, like I said, Harrison Burton gets a chance and an opportunity. We're going to talk about him here in just a little bit. But it's just, like I said, very good to see them run well. It's kind of a little bit of shots at Hailie Deegan by putting up that tape, unfortunately. It's not going to make a lot of people who are Hailie Deegan fans like myself a little happy about that. But at the same token, same time, am I really surprised about it? No, I'm not really shocked about it. And I'm not really surprised to see that they did that. In my honest opinions, I'm not really shocked to see something like that. They did that because personally, if they want to do it, that's their prerogative. And considering she hasn't been there for a long time at this point, I really don't blame them. But it's also a little controversial to do that to a former driver of yours, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Suarez. Now, Daniel Suarez being interviewed this weekend about multiple different things, including, of course, coming back and winning Atlanta Motor Speedway and nearly winning earlier today by finishing in second. But one thing he's been asked about was Pato O'Ward. And he had a very interesting and candid response in regards to Pato O'Ward. He says that Pato O'Ward is as popular as him, but he also says that Pato O'Ward is not as popular as Sergio, also known as Checo Perez. When Daniel Suarez said that quote, it was very interesting. Now, when you look at popularity across the world, I think that Daniel Suarez is definitely a very popular driver. There's no denying that. But Pato O'Ward drives for McLaren. I believe that Pato O'Ward has more followers on Instagram than Daniel Suarez does. And also, like I said, he drives for McLaren. McLaren is a much bigger world brand across the world than, of course, a team like Trackhouse Racing, even though Trackhouse Racing is continuing to grow. Obviously, they brought Shane Van Gisbergen in recent years, and he's been very successful with the organization the last couple of seasons. And they've also, of course, got their MotoGP competition where they've been pretty solid over there, though they, I believe, have not been able to win in MotoGP so far this year. But I do disagree a little bit with Daniel Suarez. Now, that being said, Daniel Suarez is a very popular driver. And when we go to Mexico City next year, there is a chance we could see both Daniel Suarez and Pato O'Ward competing. Pato O'Ward is heavily rumored to maybe drive in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race. Zach Brown did say this past week, and we talked about it on the channel this past Friday, I believe. But Zach Brown did say that if Pato wanted to run the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at that track in Mexico City, out of Donald John Hernando Rodriguez track, he could have the chance and opportunity because NASCAR has inquired about Pato O'Ward's availability. It would be really cool, though, to see Pato O'Ward maybe drive a Trackhouse Racing car, drive a Project 91 car, for example, considering Justin Marks is expected to bring back the Project 91 car for 2025 on a part-time basis. We don't know at this point how many races exactly they're going to be bringing it back for, but we do believe they're bringing it back for a select number of races in 2025. I don't, like I said, completely disagree with Daniel Suarez on that. I just think that Pato O'Ward is a little bit more popular than Daniel Suarez. Yes, Pato O'Ward drives in a less popular series like Indycar, which has been under a lot of scrutiny and under fire in recent weeks, but I don't 100% agree with Daniel Suarez. I do think that Pato O'Ward personally is a little bit more popular than Daniel Suarez, but I do think that Daniel Suarez is also pretty popular, and I think there's some popularity between both those guys, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chandler Smith versus Cory Heim. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Xfinity Series race yesterday, you saw more manufactured drama. Go back to about a week or so ago at Daytona. Parker Retzlaff got basically yelled at by Chevrolet for not working with Kyle Busch at the end of the race, but Kyle Busch did defend Parker, and Parker had to basically go on a little bit of an apology tour on multiple shows, like Dirty Mo Media's shows, like basically the Teardown, I believe, or some of the other shows that Dirty Mo Media has. But again, of course, Kyle Busch defended him. We have more manufactured drama this past weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway between both of the drivers. At the end of the Atlanta race, Chandler Smith had a really good chance and opportunity to get his first Xfinity Series win since all the way back, I believe, at Richmond in March/April. And basically, Cory Heim was also looking for his first career NASCAR Xfinity Series win. Cory Heim, instead of working with Chandler Smith at the end of the race, he decided to make a move to the outside of Chandler Smith and got a great run to the outside and passed Chandler Smith to get up front. And he actually challenged Austin Hill for the race lead at the end of the race. And unfortunately, got put in the outside wall and finished, I believe, in 5th or 6th, while Chandler Smith, I believe, finished in 3rd or 4th. Now, Chandler Smith, after the race, was not very happy with Cory Heim. He pretty much said that Chandler was a little disappointed that Cory decided to not work with him at the end of the race, and he said the Toyota teammates need to really work together. Cory Heim responded by basically saying, I'm out here to win races and I'm out here to compete. I could have worked with him a little better for sure, but I'm also out here to compete for wins. I said this with the situation with Parker Retzlaff. I am not a big fan of manufactured orders and all that kind of stuff. I think every driver should be able to go work against each other and be able to win for themselves. That's what your focus should be. You should not be wanting to push the guy to get the victory. Your goal is to go out there and win a race. That's what you're paid to do. I don't care if Cory Heim is not competing full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, which there is a chance and possibility, judging by some of the stuff going on and how much Sam Hunt really likes Cory Heim. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up full-time in that seat next year. But I think Cory Heim did what he needed to do. And I feel like this manufacturer stuff really frustrates me. And I feel like it's been getting worse and worse for a very, very long time. There's been this manufacturer drama going on for years in NASCAR when it comes to super speedway racing. You didn't used to have this back in the 2000s. You didn't have Jeff Gordon, Dale Jr. playing these orders. You didn't have Tony Stewart playing these orders. You didn't have Jimmy Johnson playing these orders. You didn't have Ford doing this years ago. And you didn't have Toyota doing this years ago. Drivers used to race for themselves. And I feel like that's how it always should be. I don't think these manufacturers need to be getting involved, and they don't need to be getting frustrated. And certainly drivers should not be getting frustrated. It's your job to go out there and win the race. And if a driver doesn't work with you, considering the fact that Cory Heim will probably never end up at Joe Gibbs Racing because of the tension behind the scenes, that's on you. You got to figure out who to work with, and you got to work with someone that's going to help you out if you want to win. I don't blame Chandler for being a little upset in the situation, but same time, because he hasn't won in a while, I don't think Cory Heim should be also criticized by Toyota. He should be able to go do what he wants to do and should be able to go out there and compete for a win. I get Chandler being upset, like I said, but at the same time, I think Cory Heim did what was in his right and was able to go out there and try to get a win and nearly got it done. I don't blame Cory Heim for doing what he needed to do, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Juan Montoya. Now, we kind of talked about this on the channel a couple weeks ago, but this weekend at Watkins Glen, Juan Montoya will make his first NASCAR Cup Series start since back at Indianapolis for the Brickyard 400 in 2014, driving a number 50 car for 23XI Racing. Juan Montoya, since that time, has competed for IndyCar championships and has been very competitive in IMSA, winning some IMSA championships during that time as well. Now, Juan Montoya basically was asked questions, and there was a video that 23XI put out asking, why did you decide to come back and do it? He said he wanted to try something new once again and try something different, in which I can't blame him for that. Juan Montoya in the NASCAR Cup Series has 2 career wins, and I think he has a really good chance and opportunity to go out and win. Yes, it's been a very long time, and the rust will probably be coming in. Luckily, Juan Montoya will have an extra 20-minute practice to kind of get used to the tires. But one thing about Juan Montoya, he always ran good at Watkins Glen every single year we ran there. It didn't matter in his rookie year where he was up competing for the win that year. 2008, I believe, finished in the top 5. 2009 was pretty good there. 2010, he went on to win and hold off a hard-charging Marcus Ambrose and Kurt Busch at the end of the race. He was very, very good at Watkins Glen over the years and over the seasons. And he's going to be competing with a strong organization like 23XI Racing, who we're going to get to here in just a little bit. But obviously, Juan Montoya is going to be driving for one of the fastest cars. 2311's been great at road courses in recent years. Tyler Reddick has won multiple road course races. I don't think he's won a road course race so far this season, but Tyler Reddick is a great road course racer, and Bubba Wallace has gotten better on road races as well. So I do think that Juan Montoya is going to be very fast, and I think we'll have a fantastic chance and a really strong opportunity to go out there and get the win and the victory. If not, I think he at least gets top 10, but wouldn't it be cool to see Shane Van Gisbergen and Juan Montoya and Kyle Larson and other guys, maybe Carlos Kerbush in the future, Kyle Busch, your Chase Elliott's, all these guys have been really strong in road courses like Christopher Bell, Tyler Reddick, William Byron, you name it. All these guys competing for the win. It'd be really cool if 8 or 9 guys could go out there and battle for the win at the end of the race and just have an amazing race. It'd be really great to see. But like I said, I do think Juan Montoya is going to be pretty competitive. I think he's going to be pretty fast, and I think I'll have a strong chance and a pretty good opportunity to go out there and compete for the win. I think he will be a threat and contender for sure to win when we do go to Watkins Glen later this weekend with 2311 Racing, considering how fast he's been in recent years at this track. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about an option tire. Now, during Playoff Media Day earlier this week, Christopher Bell was sitting down with Jeff Gluck and Jordan Bianchi from the Teardown and also from The Athletic. And he was asked a question surrounding whether or not could we see an option tire used at Phoenix Raceway. Would he like to see that? Well, Christopher Bell kind of talked about that. He kind of said, do we want the championships on who's the fastest, or do we want it based on the champion who uses a certain amount of tires? He brought up a very good point right here. Now, my personal opinion is that because, of course, we've been using the option tire in multiple different races. We saw it used in North Wilkesboro. It really didn't work. But then we used it at Richmond, and it was very successful. There are rumors they could use it at Martinsville potentially, but it's not been confirmed if they're going to use an option tire at this point. If you want my honest opinion, though, I think what they should do is instead of just having 2 different sets of tires, like a hard compound and a soft compound, just make the teams use a softer compound the whole entire time. Therefore, the racing will be a lot better. You're going to have a lot more tire fall off. One of the big things that really made that Richmond race, unfortunately because the controversy overshadowed Dawson Dillon, but one thing that was really making that race really interesting and really fun to watch for me was the interesting and crazy tire strategy that Daniel Suarez put on. And I think the racing was very good that evening. He had guys making moves. He had guys passing. It was one of the best Richmond races I've seen in recent years. I think if you got a softer tire, especially at Phoenix, yes, I know Phoenix doesn't put on the greatest racing in the world, but I think the racing would actually be a lot better. Because 1, you're going to have more tire fall off, and 2, drivers that might be better at saving their tires will be able to move up to the front a lot more quicker. Phoenix has not been a track that's historically put on better racing or really good racing, in my opinion, over the years since the track really came around. The only time I think a good race happened there was maybe 2011. I thought the 2021 championship race was a solid race overall, had some good racing between the top 5 and top 6 going on. But for the most part, historically, Phoenix has not been the most exciting race or racetrack in the world. I really would love to see some sort of softer compound come to the track to make the racing better. I thought the spring race was okay, but wasn't great. But I want to see a better championship race, especially if Phoenix is going to be around at least for the next year or so. We need to make the championship race a lot better than it's been, and not just let one driver who's good at a certain type of track be able to run away with it and run a fantastic race. I really hope we do get a softer compound for the race, as I do think that it can make a much more interesting event and much more interesting race as a whole, especially for the championship. You have those variables, and you have to be basically able to manage your stuff and your tires, kind of like the old days where you had to manage your stuff and save your tires. I really hope that comes into play, but will it come into play? We'll just have to wait and see if it does, and hopefully they do bring a softer tire, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Harrison Burton. Now, over the weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway, Harrison Burton was asked some questions surrounding his future in NASCAR. Now, Steven Taranto from CBS Sports, I believe, is the one who picked up this video, and Harrison basically told the media that he actually has received some interest from some Cup Series teams headed into 2025. But what he said was, depending on how he does in the playoffs this year, that could be a major determining factor where he heads to in 2025. Harrison Burton is among many drivers currently that do not have rides signed for the 2025 season, along with drivers like Cory LaJoie and also Zane Smith currently at the moment, which get to those 2 drivers here in just a second. But Harrison Burton, of course, picked up that win at Daytona International Speedway, which, of course, was his first career NASCAR Cup Series win. Now, outside of that, though, Harrison Burton has not ran that well in the NASCAR Cup Series. He has only scored, I believe, 3 or 4 or maybe 6 or 7 top 20 finishes the whole entire season so far, and generally has been way slow and off the pace. And most likely over the next 2 races, which again are Watkins Glen and Bristol, 2 tracks that Harrison has historically not ran well at, not just in Cup, but Xfinity and even the Truck Series as well. I'm not really expecting Harrison to set the world on fire. Now, do I think Harrison Burton has a chance to stay in the NASCAR Cup Series next year? He could. I could see him maybe going to Front Row Motorsports with them, not signing the charter agreement and deal. That could be a little murky at this point. What about RFK Racing? That could be an option going into next year. The 51 car could be an option with rumors of Justin Haley going over to Spire Motorsports in 2025, or maybe perhaps going to Hendrick Motorsports. I could definitely see that for sure. But I think that most likely Cory LaJoie is going to end up there, or maybe Zane Smith. And I don't think he's going to go to RFK Racing, because RFK Racing is expected to acquire third charter, which we're going to get to here in just a little bit. Now, the other question is, could he go down to lower series? That could certainly be an option as well for Harrison Burton going into 2025. And I think that's most likely is what's going to happen. There are rumors of him maybe going to trucks as well. I have heard Tricon Garage is certainly a possibility for 2025. But I don't think he was that great in the truck series. So I don't know if he would be better 6 or 7 years later than he was when he raced full-time at trucks. The most likely option, I think, where he goes to is AM Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I think the 15 car could be an interesting option. I know AM Racing has not ran that well, but I think Harrison Burton can do better in that car than Hailie Deegan's done. I think having a full-time driver who ran Xfinity, which, by the way, he was pretty good in the Xfinity Series, got 4 wins in 2020. Yes, I know he didn't win in 2021, but he still was a solid driver in that 2021 season. So I think you put Harrison Burton full-time in a NASCAR Xfinity Series ride, I actually do think he could run very, very well. And again, I think that's where his most likely option is going to be for the 2025 season. I could be wrong, and he stays in Cup. But again, the rides are drying up. Now, I have also heard Kaulig Racing as an option for next year. He could drive the 31. We don't know what Daniel Hemrick's future currently at the moment is. And Harrison Burton, to be fair, does have a little bit of sponsorship funding from Dex Imaging. And Kaulig is probably looking for a little bit of funding for that 31 car going into next year. But I've also heard Ty Dillon is an option for that ride. So I don't know at this point. But let's say some other rides open up with some other drivers. Cory LaJoie is a name that I've heard that could go to RFK Racing next year, but I've also heard him linked to McAnally Hilgeman. However, there's also a new rumor going around that I saw that Zane Smith could be headed to McAnally Hilgeman, considering he did drive part-time for them this year in the truck series. Him driving the 19 truck full-time, I think he legit would be a championship threat and contender in that truck. But going back to Harrison Burton, I really don't know what his future looks like going into 2025, but I do hope that he's able to find a ride. I think Harrison's a good driver that just got rushed up way too quickly. I hope he's able to find somewhere to go and somewhere to race for the 2025 NASCAR season, because I do think he deserves to be racing in NASCAR, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Alex Bowman. Now, over this week, there's been a lot of rumors surrounding Alex Bowman's future at Hendrick Motorsports. It was initially reported on Door Bumper Clear that they basically kind of let it slip, and Breakheart had quoted this as well, where they said it had Alex Bowman not run well in the playoffs and had not advanced outside of the round of 16, there was a chance that Alex Bowman may not be in the number 48 car for 2025. And then Freddie Kraft chimed in by saying there's a reason why certain drivers have not been announced for certain cars for 2025. They had indicated there had been a chance that Alex Bowman may be out of Hendrick Motorsports at the end of the year. But then, during media availability weeks on Wednesday, the next day, Alex Bowman pretty much confirmed that at the time, the rumors were unfounded and untrue. Now, he did say that he actually had to speak to Hendrick Motorsports and the boss at Hendrick Motorsports about these rumors that have been increasing, and he basically denied the rumors. He said rumors are rumors, and the rumors have been very annoying that have been going on. But then this weekend, Austin Canesi Motorsports Wire put up a very interesting article surrounding Jeff Gordon's comments. Now, Jeff Gordon was on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio a couple days ago, and he basically addressed some of the rumors. Now, he did say, I don't really like to get into rumors specifically, but he also feels there's a little bit of confidence around Alex, the organization, Blake, and everybody else in number 4018. But what's really interesting to me is the fact that he basically did not confirm that Alex Bowman 100% is going to be back in the 48 car next year. That is very interesting. Again, the rumor that's been going around, and this is a rumor that's been going on for the last couple of years, is that Alex Bowman could be out of the 48 car. But the interesting thing is Alex Bowman does have a contract with Hendrick Motorsports through the 2026 season. But here's something interesting to note. Ally is signed through 2028. Now, do I think that most likely Alex Bowman is going to get his agreement honored and he will stay Hendrick Motorsports going forward? Most likely. I don't see Alex Bowman leaving the team at the end of this year. Now, if he does somehow in some crazy way or form, where does he go? I think he goes maybe to Spire to drive a 7 car, and maybe they find a way to get Kyle Busch out of his contract to go back to Hendrick Motorsports. Maybe they get Justin Haley. We know he's rumored to go to the 7 car. I'd imagine he's there. Maybe Bubba Wallace ends up there, considering Bubba Wallace may not be a 23-11 with some of the rumors going around and stuff, even though I do think he'll still end up at 23-11. But I still think Bowman most likely is going to be in a Hendrick car. That being said, I was a little weirded out and a little confused that Jeff Gordon did not just basically come out and say, yeah, he signed for next year. These are the things Jeff Gordon could have done instead of just trying to continue these rumors on. These things Jeff Gordon could have done was basically say, yeah, Alex isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and he's with the team. But again, I do want to rephrase. When it comes to contracts can easily be broken. Just ask Cory LaJoie. Cory LaJoie had a contract through 2025 with Spire Motorsports, and they let him go. Again, Alex Bowman, if he somehow ended up at Spire Motorsports next year, him and Rodney Childers would be a very dynamic duo. But at the same time, I feel like Alex Bowman fits with the Hendrick mold. And Alex Bowman is still a driver that can get it done. Again, he's not as good as Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, or William Byron, and he's been the 4th driver, but he's probably been the best 4th driver that Hendrick Motorsports has probably ever had. Brian Vickers wasn't as good against his teammates pretty much. When Junior was struggling in 2009, he was way worse than Alex Bowman was. So I think at this point, if you're Hendrick Motorsports, the safest thing to do is keep Alex Bowman behind the wheel. I think he deserves to be behind the wheel of this car. He's done a very good job at Hendrick Motorsports. I know that he hasn't been as great, but again, you have to remember he did get an injury. He had a concussion, and he had to sit out a lot of races and had that back injury from that sprint car wreck at Lawrenceburg, Kansas. So like I said, in my opinion, I do truly believe that he does deserve to be behind the wheel of this C and be behind the wheel of this car, as I think Bowman's a really good driver. He's not as good, like I said, as his 3 teammates, but it's really interesting, like I said, that Jeff Gordon didn't really deny the rumors going around and didn't exactly confirm that Bowman is going to be back with Hendrick, even though I do personally think Alex Bowman isn't going anywhere, and I think he will be staying with Hendrick Motorsports for many years down the road. In my opinion, I wouldn't be surprised he gets an extension through 2028, but also got Roger Cruth there, who could end up in a Hendrick car in the next few years, in my honest opinion, if Bowman does struggle going forward. Maybe he will be on the hot seat again. Who knows at this point? And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about RFK Racing once again. Now, earlier this week, it was reported by Jordan Bianchi from The Athletic that RFK Racing is progressing toward getting a 3rd charter for the 2025 season, confirming that they are expected to expand to a 3-car operation next season. Ryan Preece is expected to be the driver of this 3rd car, most likely the number 60, and Kroger, which originally was rumored to be going over to Joe Gibbs Racing for 2025. They're expected to follow the money from Kroger at JTG Doherty. They're expected to head over to RFK Racing in 2025. Now, Brad Keselowski did confirm during media deals it didn't have anything to announce at that time, but they are expected to announce that 3rd charter in the next month or so. Now, looking at this, Steve Newmark was, of course, on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio this past week, and he did say that they're very optimistic they are going to get a 3rd charter and expand to a 3-car operation for 2025. This has been one of Brad's big goals that he's wanted to have for a very long time. He's been wanting to expand RFK Racing first to a 3-car operation. He has also talked about the fact that he would love to bring back the NASCAR Xfinity Series program, which there were rumors early this year they were going to be bringing it back for 2024, and we all thought it was going to be the 60 Xfinity car. Turned out he was bringing back Stage 60, and there's also rumors he could be bringing back his truck program in the future, and he's also been talking about maybe going over to IMSA. This is a really big step in the right direction for RFK, considering RFK has been an organization that in recent years prior to Brad coming over there, it was an organization that was downsizing and not upsizing. I remember back in 2005 when it was just Roush and how dominant they were. They had half their cars in the playoffs with Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Matt Kenseth, Greg Biffle, and of course Carl Edwards in the playoffs and Mark Martin. And then it just started downsizing a lot. In 06, they of course lost Kurt Busch when he went to Penske. And then of course you had other drivers that leave the organization. They go from 5 cars down to 4 cars, down to 3 cars. And they were downsizing. And there were rumors even years ago that this organization was on the verge of shutting their whole entire program down. Now they're an organization that is clearly thriving and getting better. I know Chris Buescher did not make the playoffs this year so far, but Buescher probably should have made it. And Brad Keselowski got his first win since 2021 at Darlington earlier this year. You've got a team that's really building up a program. Now, obviously, like I mentioned, the driver is expected to be Ryan Preece. I know some are probably thinking maybe Zane Smith, Sheldon Creed, Maley Deegan maybe, or other drivers like Matt Benedetto. We're going to get this 3rd seat. But remember, Ryan Preece has a really big affiliation, of course, with Kroger. Kroger worked with Ryan Preece back in the day, and of course, when Ryan Preece drove over JTG Doherty Racing, it would make a lot of sense for him to be the driver. Look, when Chris Buescher came over to RFK Racing in 2020, a lot of people were really questioning that move. He'd been solid at JTG Doherty, but wasn't really setting the world on fire. But the first year he got to that team, he was competing for a playoff spot. And then for the next couple years, up until 2022, he was continuing to improve and get better. And then in 2022, he got a 2nd career NASCAR Cup Series win at Bristol. Then in 2023, he made it to the round of 8 and scored 3 wins in about a 5-week span. Those coming at Richmond, of course coming in Michigan, and then he went on to win at Daytona. So far this year, he hasn't won, but he nearly got wins earlier this year. Ryan Preece, in my opinion, could be very similar to Chris Buescher, where he could go out there and contend for wins and contend for victories and have a shot at making the playoffs. Now, I do think in year number 1 next year, I do think that Ryan Preece may end up struggling just a little bit, but I do think Ryan Preece is a very good driver who can always get the best out of equipment. He's not a bad driver. Look what he did, of course, with organizations like Todd Gillen or Tricon Garage before they became Tricon Garage. Look what he did at David Gillen Racing. Got 2 wins in Nashville. He also won 2 races at Joe Gibbs Racing. He's never been in elite level equipment. He joined a sinking ship at Stewart Racing. He joined the year that SHR had their first winless season as an organization. So I do truly believe that if you put Ryan Preece behind the wheel of this car, I think he'd do very, very good. Now, where are they going to get the charter from? My best guess is probably going to come from Rick Ware Racing. There's rumors of Rick Ware Racing being the team that could end up selling the charter to them, considering their major technical lines that RFK and Rick Ware have. I'd have to imagine a charter is most likely coming from them. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to this charter talk. It sounds like it's very close to being announced that they are going to get a 3rd charter. It'll be very interesting to follow the story as time progresses and goes on, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about the charter agreement and charter negotiations. As it was officially confirmed over the weekend that most of the NASCAR Cup Series teams have signed the new charter agreement that will go in place starting in 2025. The new charter agreement that will start on January 1st of 2025 will be in place from the 2025 to 2031 season. Now, most teams signed, I want to make that clear. 13 of the 15 NASCAR Cup Series teams, including Hendrick Motorsports, Trackhouse Racing, Team Penske, RCR, RFK Racing, have all signed, and Joe Gibbs Racing as well, have all signed the charter agreement for next year, for the next 7 years. They are expected to get a ton of the money going into next year. They're expected to have a double increase from about 25% of the split to around 39 to 40% of the split, which will be more money for the teams that signed the charter agreement. But however, they basically have some of the new anti-disparagement clause, among other things in there, and they were not able to get everything they wanted in the new charter deal. I mention this because there are 2 organizations that did not sign the charter agreement. The first organization, which is no surprise, is 2311 Racing. 2311 Racing did release a statement on Saturday morning basically saying that we decided to not sign NASCAR's charter agreement. We feel that basically the bargaining power that we had, we weren't getting any fair shake when it comes to charter agreement, and we will probably just talk with NASCAR and we'll send a letter in regards to our decision going forward. The other organization that did not sign the charter agreement was Front Row Motorsports. So the other group that did not sign the charter agreement for next year. Bob Jenkins did speak to multiple reporters over the weekend as well by saying that we just feel like that we wasn't a fair shake for some of the teams, and it wasn't completely fair for everybody as well. Now, then The Athletic released an article, and they basically said that what they were told from multiple sources was that teams were forced and coerced into signing the charters. Apparently, they had a deadline for Friday, according to The Athletic, and teams didn't basically say every team that told them, but said that most teams were forced and coerced to signing it. They basically were told, if you don't sign this charter agreement, we're going to revoke those charters. Now, Brad Keselowski then spoke to the media, and he basically said that we were not coerced to sign the charters. We were forced to sign the charter agreement. He said it was a little bit harsh. Now, I go back and talk about 23XI and Front Row. 23XI Racing not signing the charter agreement is not a major shock to me. They have been the most outspoken when it comes to the charter negotiations. Curtis Polk spoke to me earlier today and basically kind of said that basically it's not the 1960s anymore, and they've been wanting major changes. Michael Jordan said a few months ago, he basically told the media that if they don't sign the charter agreement and don't go to a franchise model, the sport is going to die. Denny Hamlin's been very outspoken. He also spoke to me this weekend as well, and basically did confirm it's not only just affecting them, but it's also affecting 23XI Racing. We'll get to Bubba Wallace here in just a second. But continuing on, there was also then a report on late Saturday during the NASCAR Xfinity Series race that with the new proposal that came out, NASCAR is withholding 4 of the charters. And they basically said that it would be affected if a new manufacturer came in. But they also did say that they could find a way to field a NASCAR Cup Series team if they wanted to. I'm not a big fan of that personally. I don't think the France family should be able to have their own organization and team. If that is true, that's not a good look for NASCAR. That is what we call a conflict of interest. Just ask Team Penske how that has worked in IndyCar. We had the cheating situation happen with Joseph Newgarden and Team Penske, and a lot of people were accusing Team Penske of cheating the system, even though I don't think Roger Penske himself was involved in that. If you have a team like Action Express come in, you're not only going to have favoritism potentially, but you're going to have a major conflict of interest. And we've been hearing about this manufacturer rumor for a very, very long time. Now, we had heard that Honda may be looking to come in. Hyundai's been looking to come in as well. There have been rumors about Dodge. There's rumors about Cadillac wanting to come in. So there are manufacturers that are interested, but until it happens, it's like I wait till we see it, even though I do feel more likely, not as surprised to see, and I do think there's a good chance we could see a manufacturer like Honda or Hyundai coming in. Now, let's go back to Bubba Wallace. Because with 23XI Racing not signing the charter agreement, Bubba Wallace's future is a little bit uncertain. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, Bubba Wallace is still expected to return to 23XI Racing in 2025. Bubba Wallace has had a really good year so far. He's been very, very competitive with this organization. He has 5 top 5s. He's got 10 top 10s so far. He's closing on having the most laps that he's ever had in a season. He led a few laps today at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And I think Bubba Wallace does deserve to be back at this organization. The problem is, if 23XI Racing does never sign the charter agreement, his future could definitely be very, very questionable. He did speak to media about the situation, and he says that it's very, very frustrating that they can't come to the table and get everything done. He said that this affects his livelihood. Bubba Wallace has gotten better every single year he's driven for 23XI Racing. Now, let's say 23XI Racing doesn't eventually sign the charter agreement and they don't eventually sign the charter deal. What does this mean for Bubba Wallace's future? Well, Bubba Wallace could definitely have his future very, very affected. He may not end up driving for 23XI Racing next year. He might not be in NASCAR altogether. But I do think most likely he's going to be back in 23XI and driving for them. But his future, like I said, is very questionable at this moment, and he's a little bit uncertain. And you think about Tyler Reddick too, especially if they do revoke 23XI Front Row's charters. Both those drivers could be free agents going into next year and looking for rides going to 25, or maybe they're going to reopen teams, and that could certainly be a possibility. But I do think Bubba Wallace more likely will be back at 23XI Racing in 2025, but I do think his future is definitely a little bit questionable because they haven't signed a contract extension. They're still waiting on that to get done for Bubba to be back at 23XI Racing in 2025. Again, I do think it's going to get done for Bubba. I do think they're going to get it done on their side. Now, speaking of 23XI Racing, we know that they've been the most outspoken when it comes to this situation. Do I think that they're going to wait a long time to sign their side of the charter deal? Potentially, I would not be surprised or shocked if they wait a very, very long time to sign their end of the situation. If they're telling the truth and they're saying that they were coerced and threatened to sign a charter agreement, that really is a bad look on NASCAR's end, in my opinion. That's really a bad look on their end. But at the same token, in same time, I'm not really shocked or surprised that NASCAR done this. NASCAR has ruled with an iron fist for almost 80 years. I'm not saying it's right, and it's not really a good thing, but I'm not really here to defend one side or the other side. I just feel like that when it comes to this charter situation, it affects the fans very, very well. Now, NASCAR, like I said, is still going to be around next year, so that's a good thing. But what does it mean for 23XI Racing's future? Could somehow a team like Junior Motorsports find a way, if they don't get their charter, maybe they pick one up, maybe RCR, who've been rumored to be expanding to 3 cars, maybe they find a way to pick up one of those charters. That could certainly be a possibility, but front row, they're expected to expand to 3 cars going into next year, and we know that 23XI Racing, they're likely going to expand to a 3-car team as well next year, but they haven't signed a charter negotiations for their side of things. I do think eventually Denny Hamlin and front row, I think cooler heads will eventually prevail, and I'd have to think going down the road, they will sign it. I think front row will be the first team to sign of those 2 organizations, but I do think it's going to take some time for them to sign it, right? Because I think that Denny Hamlin's team wanted a fairer shake, which again, I think NASCAR was kind of telling teams, hey, you got to sign this charter agreement, otherwise you're going to lose your charter. If they basically revoke it, that's going to be a bad look, and Michael Jordan and his people are not going to be very happy. Curtis Polk was not happy speaking to media in this situation today, and I can't really blame him for it. In my opinion, I don't blame Denny Hamlin for wanting to basically stick his ground and his team to stick his ground when it comes to the situation. If they feel like they're not being treated right, I can't blame him for that. I personally think Denny Hamlin and his team are doing the right thing in their situation. I really hope this can get resolved really soon, though, for 23XI Racing side. But like I said, they have not signed a charter agreement yet for 2025. Will they? Who knows at this point? But I do think in the future you will see them sign a charter agreement because they're probably going to have to. Otherwise, their charters are probably going to end up getting revoked. But at least now we know that a charter agreement has been signed by a majority of the teams for next season. So that is going to today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. We'll description below that and combo your thoughts on today's episode. Think Bubba will also be back at 23XI Racing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think 23XI will eventually sign the charter agreement, or do you think this will go to court? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to be having the intro to this video most likely for the Cup Series race at Watkins Glen. We might also have another video dropping. Wednesday, we're going to have basically a NASCAR news video as well. And we're also going to have the race picks for the Xfinity Series race. Tuesday, we're going to have race picks for the Cup race at Watkins Glen and most likely paint scheme video as well. And then on Friday, we'll probably have a NASCAR news video, but potentially also a silly season update in some sort of way dropping as well. Got a lot of great content dropping that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.